Hello and welcome. In this tutorial I will go through a couple of designs that we did for this MiMo adapter. Before we begin, I will just give you a brief history of the part itself. So this guy, Michael, he came up with the idea to attach medical grade filters to these diver's masks. All he needed was an adapter to connect the two of them, and that's where we came into the picture. With this adapter you can virtually put any filter on it, be it medical grade or for any case, so it suits many purposes. So let's begin. The first design I will show you is a fit mold. So that's what we would normally do. After this I'll show you how to do it in a split mode instead. That's what we ended up with. Okay, let's begin. So first thing I'm doing is putting a lot of vents here. So this was a case of urgency, so I wanted it to mold right the first time, so I put way too many vents on it, but that's a good thing to do when you want it to work the first time. You can then reduce it later on. Also, these surfaces are really easy to trim, so that's why you could put as many vents on as you want. You won't notice it afterwards. Some more vents here and a couple of vents on the side. So now I'll just start the gating here, as you see. So there's of course the part of checking the printability. We can do that here. I put a mold around it. This mold I know fits one of the frames that we have, that's why I chose it. And also why we ended up with the direction of printing, because as you see here, this part is actually printable in almost any directions. So this was just a matter of making it fit the frame that we have. What I'm checking for when I do this is parts that pop up somewhere here all of a sudden, because that of course won't do. But this part is made for additive manufacturing, so it works perfectly. Okay, let's get on. So I've added some fillets here because our frame has it. It's a nice detail as well, and also some chamfer here to compensate for the burn-in layers. Now I've begun the end of the gating because I want to shoot in from here. So now I know I have a starting point and I have my end point down there. Okay, now I just need to attach the two of them. So let's just make this transparent. Okay, next thing. So the way I did it, now I have some recess for bad material that comes down here, and hopefully the good material will run down and inject it. It doesn't look too pretty, but again, it had to be done quickly and it works. The next thing is that since this is the direction of printing, I want to make sure that these vents down here doesn't clog up when we use burn-in layers, the first initial layers that we do for printing. So we just made some tracks here to allow the resin to move out, and also it works as a place for air to get out when we inject it. So last thing I did was just a small ring up here. So it's basically 0.2 of a millimeter high, but it's just to make sure that we close really tight when we injection mold it. And that's basically it. This is a really simple mold, but as you can see here, it is also 100 millimeters high around it. So it's both a long print to do, so it gets kind of expensive, and we knew that we had to make a lot of these in a short time, so we actually had to come up with a method to reuse these molds. Normally you sacrifice a mold with the film process, but you can also do it in a way that you can actually reuse these. So I'll show you how to do that. Again, this is the part that you saw before, exactly the same. So the gating is exactly the same place. We put a mold around it, just like before. Let's see what happens here. So what I did here was, I'm beginning to do what would be a split mold, because we want the inside of this part as a single body, and then we want to split this part up here in two, so we can actually put them together. It's gonna be real cool. Just hang on. So the same goes down here, and now we actually have two bodies. So we have the inner core, and we have the outer core, as you see here. So what we're doing is actually printing all the mass between these two. And now we just split these. You can do it by cut extruding a very thin line, or just using a split line. In this case we used a split line. Okay. So now we have three bodies. And if you want to see it with this part here. So down here it's really tight fit, but there's a room for a bit of air here, which works as the vent itself, so we don't have to put a lot of small holes everywhere. And the same goes down here. It's just okay. Now we'll add some details here. It's the same frame and also the same gating as we used before, because we know it worked. So now we basically have a split mold. I will show you once again. So it runs down here, everything off, and now you can split these off, and then you can, what we did was just pull the TPE part off. It worked really well. But now the problem with split molds is that the injection pressure, and especially when you have the gating in a split line, these parts will most certainly move away from each other, just a bit at least, as much as there's room for. So what we can do is make sure that these parts doesn't move all around. So what we did here was that we made some cut extrudes here, some holes for pins, steel pins. So the steel pins actually only work as steering, as guiding pins. So we're sure that these parts doesn't move away from each other. So what you could also do was actually making holes through the part and using some screws and nuts. I would do that normally, but again, this was a part that we had to be able to do one in 30 or 60 seconds, and if you had to unscrew it each time, you would have to spend a lot of time doing that, and also perhaps another human. And also it would require some extra staff to do that. So we gave it a shot with the pins and it worked. Last thing was a long pin through this part here to make sure that it didn't wobble or move up and down. And that's basically all there was to this part. So again, I'll be sure to link some videos and articles in the description. Go check that out. It was a really cool part, and after this we ended up making it as a seal tool, and perhaps I'll come back to this in another video later on. But for now, this was a quick guide on what we did here. Thanks.